Nelson was talking about new worlds being created, computerization happening, and he tried to emphasize that we can't allow these things to simply overtake us, that we have to be actively involved in the design of these processes. And he immediately related his ideas to education. So he wrote something called Some Premises Relevant to Teaching. I submit for your attention. He said, we live in media as fish live in water. Today, at this moment, we can and must design the media, design the molecules of our new water. And he made a list of points. Number one, the human mind is born free, but is everywhere in chains. The educational system serves mainly to destroy, for most people, in varying degrees, intelligence, curiosity, enthusiasm, and intellectual initiative and self-confidence. We're born with these. They're gone or severely diminished when we leave school. 2, everything is interesting until ruined for us. Nothing in the universe is intrinsically uninteresting. Schooling systematically ruins things for us. Number 3, there are no subjects. The division of the universe into subjects for teaching is a matter of tradition and administrative convenience. Number 4, there is no natural or necessary order of learning. Teaching sequences are arbitrary, explanatory hierarchies, philosophically spurious. Prerequisites are a fiction, spawned by the division of the world into subjects. Number 5, anyone retaining his natural mental faculties can learn anything practically on his own, given encouragement and resources. Number 6, most teachers mean well, but they're so concerned with promoting their images, attitudes, and style of order that very little else can be communicated. Among the things that stand out to me is that hackers have a central concern for knowledge and learning. Yet they believe that the educational systems are broken, and they work against the very ideals that they espouse. In other words, education is not accomplishing what it should. He says a lot of the criticism is that computers are inhuman. And he goes on very eloquently to say, living teachers can be as inhuman as members of any people-prodding profession, sometimes more so. He talks about computers freeing teachers for the creative part of their work, as well as students being able to be released. And he begins to talk about what I would consider the hacker goal of education, which is to rescue the student from the inhuman teacher. To allow students to relate directly and personally, and to move immediately to intrinsically interesting matter. So instead of an education that produces a nation of sheep or clerks, Nelson says education ought to be clear, inviting, and enjoyable, without booby traps, humiliations, condescension, or boredom. It ought to teach and reward initiative, curiosity, the habit of self-motivation, intellectual involvement. Students should develop through practice abilities to think, argue, and disagree intelligently. Educators and computer enthusiasts tend to agree on these goals. He defines the enemy. The enemy, in the hacker ethic, is central processing in all its commercial, philosophical, political, and socioeconomic manifestations. Let's look at something called the Hacker Manifesto by Mackenzie Wark, something you can look up online. It says, the hacker desires knowledge, not education. A politics of free information, free learning, the gift of the result to a network of peers. Hacker knowledge implies an ethics of knowledge, subject to the claims of public interest, and free from subordination to commodity production. Hackers really hate the idea that commerce would intrude commercial considerations. And he comes out boldly in saying education is slavery. Essentially, professions in the higher education have sold out to the interests of business and government. And so education then is understood as an institutionalized instructional system with allotted roles that perpetuate the status quo. Now, some educators see technology as reducing humanity, but I want to be very clear that the hacker ethic sees it as a true release of the human spirit. That computers are a source of truth, beauty, and ultimately transformation. That computer experiences consist of media to be designed, involving a creative process with the audience users in mind. And media should be collaboratively designed. And that becomes really important for what's still fueling it. Designed media experiences are not hoarded or commodified, but placed in a radical, open publishing network. Openness, access, and freedom is driving much of the digital revolution. So the hacker ethic is a series of principles. It involves the efficiency of information. That consists of speed, space, how much room information takes, as well as speed, how fast information is processed. It believes in seat-of-the-pants problem solving. It involves a mistrust of authority. It's a decentralized decision-making. It believes that you should work out of your passion. It emphasizes the joy of discovery, access, sharing, and openness, a free exchange of ideas. And we should never forget that it always involves creating a better world. Mark Zuckerberg has gotten a great deal of attention, co-founder of Facebook. 2009, he describes it and says, "We didn't start with some grand theory, but with a project hacked together in a couple of weeks." He said, every 6 to 8 weeks, Facebook conducts hackathons, where people have one night to dream up and complete a project. We have a big belief in moving fast, pushing boundaries, saying it's okay to break things. He said, we've got this whole ethos that we want to build a hacker culture, which leads me to suggest that perhaps Facebook is the mainstream of the hacker culture. It's more than individual inventiveness. A hacker should always practice freedom of expression, respect privacy, catalyze self-initiative, be enthusiastic about involvements, have a passionate attitude toward their work, do work that's truly enjoyed, exercise creativity, should promote the desire to realize oneself and one's ability, establish teams spontaneously around projects. And it's about creating rich communities of interest instead of forced communities of instruction. I ran across something from Trevor Owens, who's an information technology specialist. He has his own PhD, very respectable man, who works with the Library of Congress. And he's talked about something called the interest-driven curriculum, oriented around online affinity communities. The hacker ethic involves a desire to share one's skills with a community, having common goals along with the need to acquire recognition from peers. The hacker ethic embraces flexible hours, creativity, and passion. As I've said, the fruits of one's work are donated to everybody so that they can advance and further develop projects. It disdains monetary reward for one's achievements and prefers what open sourcers have called ego boo, which stands for ego boost, and it's the respect of one's peers for work done freely and voluntarily. Fuels some of the most exciting and transformative online experiences today. This relates also with something that I've come to appreciate, particularly through a friend of mine, Mark Sample, who I consider not only an insider to this orientation, but very much a pioneer, working in higher education, George Mason University. You can find him on Chronicle, he submits things there. Winsome person. And he said, Gerardo, he said, you need to know there's playfulness involved. And that really struck me. Sure enough, when I looked it up, Richard Stallman, for example, among others, who was initially involved in the development of all this technology at MIT back in the 60s, he writes about playfulness and cleverness and exploration. And he talked about hack value, something having hack value. He tells this story about going to a Chinese restaurant. They gave him too many chopsticks, so he started picking them up and was trying to learn to eat with 3 chopsticks instead of 2. He said after a few minutes he was able to get it and was able to eat comfortably using 3 chopsticks. Asked, like, why would you do that? He said, because it's fun. You know, it's not easy to do, but it's fun. It has hack value. And I thought that was just a wonderful thing about playfully doing something different, whether it's useful or not. It's a fundamental part of this hacker ethic. Playfulness is something that is being rediscovered and redesigned. It's something that occurs at the essence and is a part of the tone of the community. Hacking, Richard Stallman writes, is a playful act. In a primal sense, play is the investigation and experimentation with borders and combinations. Less yak, more hack. It's a wonderful little mantra that you'll find. Too much talking, not enough doing. Linux is a nice example of this, an alternative operation system based on open source principles and part of fueling the open source movement. Linus Torvalds, being the man behind that, talks about the gift economy and establishing whole realms based on a gift economy. And it's part of fueling the open source movement that emphasizes transparency. It's distributed. It involves exploration. There's a recovery of craftsmanship. This word berkelure is used a great deal, which really has to do with making do. And because I think that it has a lot to do with providing an alternative to our segmented and commercialized life. To me, there's a lot of talk about the non-alienated self, about rediscovering wholeness and a true sense of what it means to be human. So this playful hacker ethic is so successful, we now count on the free flow of information. I mean, there are so many things that we depend on because we don't pay for them. And we would feel insulted if somehow we had to pay for them. At the same time, the hacker ethic creates instability and anxiety because hackers push programs beyond what they're designed to do. That's the goal. That's fun. There's an essential tension then between the ethics of formative retreat and the hacker ethic. And in the moments that I have, I'll say that it's based in part on the assessment of what it means to be an adult. As the goals of discipline and piety go up in an institution, the tendency to see students as not yet adults goes up, and forms of paternalism are enacted. I'll let you fill in the details from your own institutions. I know that I could in my own. But hacker ethics assume something very different. They assume that the younger are faster, that they are able to intensely focus, that they can work against obstructive authority, and that they're essentially smarter than adults. Church-related higher education promotes freedom as something that's productively constrained. But the hacker ethics see freedom as something to be maximized, even essentialized. Access to computer networks should be total and unlimited. And this is only part of the story, but it's something that is relevant to us in higher education. And so once again, I return to the notion of open access. Open access is huge. It involves a very curious alternation between intense isolation and radical sociability. it is not correct to see people as isolated. So when people will joke about going to a cafe to be with other people while they're online, doing things by themselves, what they're doing online is they're connecting to other people. So there is an interesting new form of sociability that's being promoted that seems to go back and forth in that way. The Stewart Brand Whole Earth Catalog said information wants to be free.